So, Phil Nagel, thank you for joining us at SAT Media. It's truly a pleasure having you here today.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Let's start out first by, can you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and the district that you're running in?
Absolutely. My name is Phil Nagel, and I'm running for Illinois State Senate in the 40th District. So my district encompasses elements of Chicago Heights, all the way down, cutting, Manteno in half, Moni in half. It's,
Okay.
a great job of cutting a lot of towns in half, right? Down to Kankakee area, and then over through Bourbonnais, and along 55 up through Braywood, Wilmington area. So that's my district. I've been married for about 18 years now. Most wonderful woman in the world. And I have two great young boys. One's in senior in Army ROTC, and the youngest one is just turned 17, and he got into college early. So very proud of them, and full of hope for the future for the kids. So.
So, and within your background, if I remember correctly, you had some military service as well?
Yeah, so like my grandpa before me, my grandpa was in World War II. Hear stories about his, here were his World War II stories, my entire life. And, that gave me a lot of motivation to, follow in his footsteps. Mm-hmm. So I joined the Air Force after high school, and I did a few years in the Air Force. And now my oldest boy is, like I said, in Army ROTC program. So this fall, he will be graduating to become an officer in the U.S. Army. So I can't be more proud of him for that. We have a long line of serving in my family, and, I'm just, fortunate enough to be part of that and to, watch my sons both develop into men and into leaders, and, nothing makes me prouder.
Very good, very good. So thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And let's get some questions in.
All right, sounds good.
All right, so the first one. I was browsing your website and noticed that there were some strong themes within that website. You specifically focused on parental choice and freedom, protecting our children, endless, needless regulation, mandates, better economy, and safer neighborhoods. That's quite a bit to cover, but can you grab a couple of those and tell us about what in particular you're focused on with those?
Absolutely. So my story started when my youngest boy got into the Illinois Math and Science Academy. He worked very hard to get into that academy because it's a very prestigious academy, right? He wants to be an astrophysicist, and you know what? He got in. Well, one of the unintended consequences of COVID was remote learning. And as my son did, and every other child across this country did for the better part of 2020, and unfortunately in through 2021 for a lot of students, they sat right next to our room, right? My son sat right next to my room, and I listened for a year while he learned while he was taught critical race theory. It's spreading like wildfire across this country, and all it does is it groups children by race, by religion. Instead of unifying children together, it teaches them that because you have something, you're different here, or you have this and someone else doesn't have this, it teaches them, it puts a wedge in between them and starts to make them question, well, are you better than me? What comes from that? Division.
Right.
So division is how you obviously separate the people. And after a year of that, after my son who sat through a year of that, he finally said, I'm done. He's like, I'm not going to listen to this anymore. And he walked away of his own accord. And I've never been prouder for him. He gave up his dreams because he knew what was going on was wrong. And like I said, I couldn't be more proud of him to take a stand on his own and walk away from his dreams for that reason.
Right.
So my story starts right there. And I can tell, go through the entire, the entire storyline. But I also want to say, my story isn't just my story. so many kids across the entire country experience the same thing. And I've been fighting for both my boys during this entire pandemic, but sadly, so many other kids are experiencing the same thing, if not worse than what my kids are experiencing. And that's not right. That's not right. Whether it be through critical race theory, whether it be through these endless mandates, right? I don't care if you're talking about a mask mandate or a vaccine mandate. None of it matters. The foundation of this country was built on the freedom of choice, and that's what's under attack in this current climate.
Right.
And that's what we need to change. So I worked on a bill. I had a state representative reach out to me, and I worked on a bill with him. It's called the Parental Medical Choice Act. And what it does is, and it was filed, it went to the Rules Committee, HB 4149. Obviously, it wasn't a priority for the current General Assembly.
Exactly.
So
the makeup, I'm sure, doesn't allow for such things.
Exactly. But what it does, essentially, it takes away the governor's ability to put any type of medical mandate on any child in K through 12 schools or in college. And without the protections, without medical protections, where are we headed? I mean, it's a simple question. It's a simple question. Are we headed for a controlled state? I mean, sure looks that way to me.
Right.
And we need good people across the entire country to step up, and I think they are. I've truly been inspired by the people that are normal people just like me. I did 4 years in the Air Force, and then I went into chemical manufacturing for the last 16, 17, 18 years, whatever it's been now. I'm getting kind of old. But one of the other unintended consequences of this is this has woken people up across the country. Normal parents like myself who have been fighting for their kids, we're not taking this anymore. We're stepping up. I know of a handful of really great candidates in the Republican Party that have stepped up. You know, they're sacrificing time with their family. They're sacrificing time with their kids. I feel horrible with my wife. I see her, for the last, month, and I've only been doing this for a month. You come in, you say hi, you leave, you say bye, and you see your kids, here and there. But you know what? That's what matters. When we're gone, we leave this next generation. We have to develop the leaders of this next generation, and what they're doing to these kids is unforgivable. They are scarring these kids, the scars that cannot be healed. These kids have to live with what this government has placed on their hearts, and it's a very sad state to see right now. And we need to elect a lot of good people. And you know what? I have 100% confidence that come November, we're going to take the House, we're going to take the Senate in the state, and we're going to take the governorship. And we're going to see that trend cross to the federal government. We're going to see the House, the U.S. Senate, and the presidency. Obviously not yet the presidency, but we're going to take control of all of these institutions, and not on the back of the people with the money, financing, and all that. We're going to take it on normal folks like me, like you, that want change, but more so than that, we're going to demand change. And you know what? We're going to do it at the ballot box. We're going to go there. My wife, she'll find she's already made sure my oldest son's available to vote, right? We're all going together. She's going out there finding every voter she can right now to vote come November, June,
Right.
for the primary, and then November. So what I'd like to say is what they're doing to these kids is unacceptable. Parents are fighting back, but we can't stop. I've talked to so many people, and I even talked to my wife, and you know what? What are we doing? How do we stop this?
Right.
And there's proceedings working through the judicial side of the government, which is great. That's short-term. That's a short-term solution. The long-term solution is we can't sit back and just allow this to happen anymore. We have to step up and start participating in the system. We have to. And what I tell a lot of people that I talk to that are very down and are just like, okay, there's no hope. And trust me, I've experienced it. I think all of us have when we look around. But there is hope. And, if we all start coming together and, getting groups together and getting ready for this, for this election, start pushing your, folks that don't normally vote to vote. I'll tell you right now, 1 year is a lot closer than 4 or 5 or 6 years.
Sure.
And that's what we're looking at. We're going to see J.B. Pritzker, we're going to see him dropping these mandates relatively soon because he knows he's not going to win in court.
Right.
So we're going to see these mandates start falling off soon. And just like they did last summer, they're going to fall off. And then as soon as it's convenient, they're going to start right back up again. Right after the election, which I don't think he has a chance in. Obviously, the Republican Party's put forward some very strong candidates. But I think if for some reason, some miracle, somehow he were to get in, we're going to go right back to these mandates again. We're not. I want to tell your audience, these aren't going to end. They'll give us a break here and there, and they have to, because if you keep us down that long, people are going to rise up.
Right.
But
Yeah, I agree. So obviously family is an important facet of everything you do. And I want to stick with the legislative branch. And you have out there groups like Black Lives Matter, feminist movements, and others that are part of a progressive, radical agenda taking place. And they've installed things like the 1619 Project and elements of that are carried along. You mentioned critical race theory, and there's more. What can be done legislatively to handle that kind of infiltration and movement away from the family in Illinois?
So there are a few things that can be happened. So first off, there was an element of Black Lives Matter, and I think we've all witnessed it over the last couple of years, how that ideology has kind of grown and expanded through this country. Well, I'll tell you right now, and popular or not, all lives matter. I don't care what color you are, and until we stop seeing colors, we're not going to move. We're not going to move forward. I can talk to anyone I talk to. I don't look at them by their race. My wife, and my wife is Hispanic. When me and her met, she had a 3-year-old child, and his grandfather's from Mexico, and I adopted him. Very shortly after we got married, and we had to stop. And I say that because I never saw race, and there's so many of us don't see race.
Right.
We don't, but the media, that's all they put in front of you. They use it as a tool to divide us, which is unacceptable. It truly is. I'm not a supporter of Black Lives Matter. I'm a supporter of all lives matter, and they do. No matter what race or creed or whatever, all lives matter. They truly do, and we should act like they do. We need to start, moving in that direction. As far as other elements of this, so what are we going to do for the violence? So here's a very interesting question, and I find myself, stuck in the same mindset. So I talk about, we're starting to see crime, right? And I'm about an hour south of Chicago.
Okay.
We're seeing crime overflowing from the city, and I catch myself multiple times saying, okay, so here's the problem in front of us. We have crime overflowing from Chicago. How do we stop this crime from getting down to where we're at? And that's not the right question. It is absolutely not the right question. The question is how do we cut it off at the source? How do we move this country from Chicago had, I think, 800 homicides, right? Something like that.
Yeah, Chicago, but it was, Cook County was over 1,000.
Yeah. Did you know more kids were shot in Chicago than died of COVID in the last 2 years? You have a better chance of surviving COVID if you're under the age of 18 than you do of getting shot in Chicago. I mean, it's truly sad. We need to get these kids back in school. And you look at the, Chicago's teachers union, right? And then you look at Mayor Lori Lightfoot. I mean, we don't need to go any further to see a destructive atmosphere when the unions are fighting the mayor in the same party. This is, I mean, and who's suffering? Who's made us suffer while these adults argue with each other?
Right.
Our kids have fallen so far behind in the education system. It's going to shock the world in a year or two when we look back and say, wow, what actually happened? How did, the United States is already down in what, the 30s or 40 ranked, 40s ranked, from an education standpoint. What has this last 2 years done to these kids?
And the strange thing of that is we're in the bottom for performance, but we're in the top for funding.
Absolutely. And I may be wrong. I may be off a little bit on my numbers here. I want to say the last time I looked, it was something like 21,000+ per child in Chicago in CPS school district. I think it's 5,000, roughly a little bit over 5,000 per kid on average across the state. Okay, so you know what? The school districts, they don't want, my son, my oldest boy, he works at Dunkin' Donuts. While this entire pandemic has gone on, he has worked almost the entire pandemic. And you know who he's giving coffee to? The teachers that are too scared to come to work because of COVID, but they're more than happy to come to the
Dunkin'
drive-thru.
Donuts.
Absolutely. These kids have suffered, and enough is enough. We are done with it.
Yep.
The Chicago's public school system is not representing these kids. They're obviously representing the unions, and and I have a lot of friends that are in the union, and I 100% support them. But the infighting, when the kids are what matters here. That's the future of this country.
Yes.
I'm lucky enough, when I was young, I said, wow, my dad's 40 years old. Wow, he's just old. I mean, man, if he, I thought life was over at 40 when I was young. And now, I'll be 40 here very, very soon. Life's not over, but at the same sense, when you're a kid looking up, to that age bracket,
Right.
You're like, okay, well, their life, they've accomplished what they've accomplished in life, and that, and we gotta move past the separate, how we're dealing with this. It's just, and it's hard to think about it, because these kids, they're carrying a burden that was never theirs to carry. And why are they doing that?
They were targeted.
Exactly. They're carrying adults' fear on their shoulder. So I'm scared, or you're scared, or another party's scared. So what are we going to make the kids do? We're going to put it all on the kids.
Right.
And by the way, you know what? Let's make sure they're not in school, and that way we can ensure that where else do they have to go? They're going to spend days out on outside. They're going to spend days looking for something to do instead of spending that time in school. And for so many of these kids, school is more than just education, right? It's maybe their meal for the day. We don't know their situations. All we know is what's going on in Chicago is a travesty, and the children are the ones paying for it.
So you'd mentioned that outside of the education factor, things that are affecting the kids. Let's go in that angle a little bit. There was a bill passed in the legislature for this year, where the kids are given an extra 5 days for behavioral and mental health days that don't count against anything. So is something like that, does that actually help them, or is that somewhat of a hindrance possibly?
So that's a self-induced problem from the Democratic Party, right? They're going to lock these kids down for months, if not years at a time, and expect them to not, go into an element of depression possibly. I mean, so you almost need to give this to them now, because you have ruined them. You've ruined many of their lives and futures. And so now you're going to say, okay, well, now you get 5 days off. in the long term, what does that even do? What is that, a Band-Aid on a...
Yeah, it
on
sounds like a Band-Aid.
Yeah, it's a Band-Aid. You say you're bleeding out, you're in the military, right? You see, a friend, gets shot on the battlefield and maybe they're bleeding out. What are you gonna do? Put a Band-Aid on it? And that's what they're doing to it. This isn't here's 5 days off. I mean, in what world does that even make sense to a solution to a problem? Teen suicide under the age of 18 is up over 300%, and it's very quickly approaching that 400% level. And so their solution is, okay, let's give them some stress days. No, the solution is get these kids back in school. Stop placing our fear on their backs. It doesn't need to be this way. The problems are not complicated to solve. They're simple. We look at, for instance, these executive orders, right? So we have a fluid condition, a worldwide pandemic, right? Illinois is experiencing, numbers like we've never seen, COVID cases like we've never seen. Well, I encourage you, and I'm sure you have looked at them, the executive orders. Okay, so what changes on them month to month? And I can tell you very, very little. The one thing that I catch that changes usually month to month is based on whatever court proceedings are going on, usually down in southern Illinois. There's the states being sued for these mandates all over, and they've consolidated them. Well, usually the one thing that changes in the executive order is what's going to help me in court. So if you're going to go after this element of court and go after the state and for this, I'm just going to change the Illinois law now and make it so you can't.
Right.
So now we have to relitigate that issue because I have an executive order for it. The legislature is missing. And sadly enough, and this blows my mind, the Democrats currently have a supermajority. They don't even need Republican input, yet the governor of Illinois prefers to go solo on these executive orders. Is that not isn't it?
He's legislating from Springfield.
Absolutely. So why is there a legislator? I mean, why do we have a House and a Senate if they're not going to be used? And this isn't a specific problem to just one party. We need to move back and actually follow the Constitution. The framers were very smart people, and they were very young. I was shocked when I learned the ages of some of them in their low to mid 30s, and it blows me away the amount of intelligence and just how smart they were. But they wrote an amazing document, and it's not a fluid document. This document doesn't change over time. You don't need to interpret it. It's in black and white. It's pretty, you learn it in grade school or junior high. You test on it. It's a simple document. We just need to go back to the basics and follow it.
Right.
It's that simple.
Yeah. And oddly enough, you brought up the Constitution because at the time that the Declaration of Independence was written and the Constitution, there was a smallpox outbreak. So they knew what a pandemic was. Mm-hmm. And yet the Constitution doesn't have any mechanism built in to say, okay, there's a pandemic, we're going to stop this for a while and move on. And somehow that's what's happened through executive order in states and obviously with the federal government as well.
I could try to respond to that, but you captured it. You said exactly what I would say. You said it word for word. The Constitution doesn't take a break for a pandemic, and if it would have, it would have been in the Constitution. But You're absolutely correct. It's not. And now we look at these executive orders, the emergency management, however J.B. Pritzker wants to do it. He's doing one after another. So where does it end? If you look at that, you can interpret these documents any way you want. And this pandemic will only end when it's helpful to his election campaign or it helps him or his party in some certain way. This pandemic has been politicized. And I read an article last couple days or so. And one of the neighboring counties, they said, well, we have so many COVID cases right now, right? We can't keep up with them. And then, yesterday or today I read that the current administration says, oh, we're thinking about, laxing back on the restrictions. And then I talked to a superintendent just recently and said he's never seen so many kids out, even throughout this entire pandemic. There's more kids out today than there ever has been. So what is someone to gather if you just ask a simple question? So what is actually going on? Is this politicized? There's obviously a virus. Many people have gotten sick from it, and that's a tragedy. But are we going to shut down the entire country every time there's a virus?
Right.
And if we are, we're not going to be a country very much longer.
No.
It's that simple.
Right. So let's change direction a little bit, and we're going to move away from education and the pandemic.
Okay.
And then let's move to 562.
Okay.
And I'm going to quote the Constitution because basically we're on that mode right now. So the Second Amendment and well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I think it's pretty clear, really. And in Illinois, we have one of the strongest gun control legislation in the union. Given that, they passed 562, which takes our FOID card and makes it more accessible, easy to use, maybe even combination of FOID and concealed carry. You can do several things, but it's just an ease for continued restriction against the Second Amendment. So what's your stance on the FOID card and the Second Amendment?
So the FOID card, Illinois is one of the last states in the entire country that still carries that FOID card requirement. And it is absolutely an infringement on our Second Amendment rights. And, when I talk to people about it, people obviously have, are pro-gun, anti-gun. Well, when you really look at it, what's easier? And I go back to the Constitution here for a moment. Our framers, they put the amendment in there for a reason, because an unarmed populace is a controlled populace. The same thing that happened when the British were here, right? So first thing they wanted to do was unarm us. Why? Why do you want to unarm your unarmed populace? Well, because they're easy to control. So our framers knew that, and that's why they put that amendment into the Constitution. It's that simple. But I like to go into a few statistics once in a while too, or when I talk to people about guns. It's, you think about it. So, and I enjoy statistics. The political side of things, I never plan on running for office ever in my entire life. This is kind of what's going on in the country. Has kind of thrust us all into this type of, stand up or shut up, right? Do something or just, get out of the way and let the people that want to fight back. But when it comes to guns, and that's where I was going with that. I enjoy reading, not so much books. I enjoy reading legislation. I enjoy reading, policy. For whatever reason, that's where I'm comfortable at. But we need to step up, all of us too. So, like I said, I can go on a tangent about that too, but obviously. But so from a gun standpoint, so we have a population of roughly 325 million. I know it's probably more than that now, right? Over 325 million people in this country, let's say, for ease of
Give or
math.
take 100 million.
Exactly, right? So let's look at gun deaths, right? So I think it's average, accepted, right? That we have roughly 30,000 gun deaths per year. Well, let's expand those numbers, right? Let's just not give it a blanket number of 30,000 deaths, right? So any death is horrific, right? It is. But now let's expand those numbers. So what if I told you that 65% of those 30,000 deaths were from suicides? So I'm going to venture to say, if you are suicidal, which is sad, and it is a problem in this country, I don't know that having a gun or having medicine or anything like that is going to stop it. It's, prayer is your best remedy to that. But you look at so you take off 65% of that 30,000 right off the bat, right? I believe the numbers were something like 17% of those homicides or gun deaths were from, police officers in line of duty, which are completely justified, that we have put them and bestowed a tremendous amount of responsibility on them. And so those are justified, right? They're in the line of fire. They have to be able to protect themselves. But then you go down to, you can extrapolate those numbers out quite a ways. But let's actually go down to the actual criminal violence, right? So, gang violence, criminal violence, actual real homicides, that is really what you're looking at when you talk about gun violence. We're looking at about 5,100 gun violence deaths per year. And again, that is horrific. But if you break those numbers out even a little bit more, you're looking at, let's see here. I want to say you're about, let's look at Chicago. I think between Chicago, Detroit, let me see here. I remember this here. Baltimore and Washington, D.C. They carry 25% of the gun deaths in this entire country. And obviously, we all know they have some of the strictest gun laws in the entire country. Right. So it's not the laws that are killing the people. It's the policy that is being enacted in those states. We're not going to argue. Look at Detroit. We've had one party rule in that, area for how long? At one point we have to step back and say, is this working? It's not.
Right.
It's not working. So moving back to the, 5,100 gun deaths, right? Mm-hmm. That's a lot. So I'm not going to argue it, but crime is crime. Those that are committing crimes, we need to absolutely have harsher punishments for, and we need to bring more cops in to support, bringing these people off the streets. But let's go 5,100 again, right? And so how many, let's look at, overdose deaths. Mm-hmm. On average, we're about 40,000 a year. So 40,000 compared to 5,100. Those overdose deaths, those are, in my mind, very preventable. They really are. And the problem to solve, the solution to it isn't very difficult. But let's continue on. Let's look at, for instance, unnecessary medical deaths. Mm-hmm. We have about 200,000 of them per year that take place. Again, trumping the 5,100 deaths in gun violence mm-hmm. by a massive amount. And, for that, like I say, the Democratic position to go get rid of our guns, right? Well, let's look at the Big Macs. And I ate one right before it came out here, right?
Right.
They're delicious. But heart disease kills over 700,000 people per year, which you can extract, when you compare it to gun violence, where are you going to get the most bang for your buck, if I may?
Right.
Let's go after Big Macs, which I don't mean that, obviously, because mm-hmm. I love Big Macs, but right. it's a choice. It's as simple as that. It's a choice. And we'll go back to, let's take that whole 30,000 again, right? And we have a population of, and I like doing this because I get to use my fingers for once here to count. And so we have 325 plus million people in this country, and we have 30,000 gun deaths. And that's with, suicides and all that, which is sad. But that comes out to 0.0000009% of deaths. We can't just generalize this anymore. There's a reason why it was put in the Constitution, and there's a reason why it needs to stay in the Constitution.
Right.
We need to get rid of the FOID card. The fact that we are allowing the FOID card to stand in this state is absolutely appalling.
It's almost criminal.
It is. I will say, and this position may differ from other folks inside this party, though, I do believe there is an opportunity to train people. There is a concealed carry course, obviously, that you need to, but I don't think you have to really, when you go through that concealed carry course, there's, so much bureaucracy tied to it. There needs to be a way we need to get rid of the FOID card, and we also need to enhance the level of training associated with these weapons, because they are deadly weapons. But if instead of, I went through a gun class, right? I was in the Air Force, and then
Right.
to get a concealed carry license, which I still have never turned my information in for, there is, I want to say, I went through the class, and there's a lot of focus on Illinois law, which is important. Illinois law is, in my opinion, very anti-gun owner. And you look at states like Texas and Florida, and they have very strong stand your ground laws. Illinois, I mean,
Right.
you can essentially have someone break into your house, and as long as they do it quietly, they can take whatever they want in your house and walk right out of it. If you shoot them, you're probably going to jail. And that's not even a stretch of that's not a very far stretch of the imagination. Yeah, I mean, the Illinois laws when it comes to gun violence are very one-sided. And when I get into the Senate, and I will get into the Senate because we are done with this, we are absolutely done with this, I will work on legislation that protects the people in their homes and not the violent offenders. And that I will promise.
Very good. At the start of 2022, there were over 300 bills that will go into effect, one of which is the minimum wage increase. Is that a good move for the state of Illinois, or is that something that is targeted in a different area?
So it's targeting a different area. It's not a good move. We're regulating too much in this country, and specifically in this state where government is just far the expansion of government in this state is just, it's appalling. But it's, again, a simple solution to a simple problem. Supply and demand, right? Capitalism. This is what this country was founded on. Supply and demand is going to dictate pricing. And if you artificially inflate minimum wage, I mean, through Congress, you can do it.
Sure.
But what's that doing? You're just causing inflation. Capitalism will catch up to that very quickly. If you're going to raise the price to, the minimum wage to $15, then you're going to see all the price, everything that's associated with that, which is the entire supply chain. You're going to see those numbers rise to reflect that change. Capitalism is going to work no matter how you try to manipulate it. You're not going to get away from it. The problem is when you do that at the same time, you're also hammering the rest of Illinois, the rest of the folks that are working, because we have to keep up with, everyone has to keep up with inflation. And then their answer is, let's print more money. That's not the answer. It's not the answer at all. These problems aren't difficult at all. Right now, I can go to one of the local Dairy Queens, and I love Dairy Queen, right? My wife, she kind of gives me a smirk every time I stop at work and grab, blizzards after work, all the time. But
Right.
I can tell you this for a fact, because I just drove by there. They have a $14 an hour minimum wage right now. That was that way for a while now. That's not just new to this year. That's been there. That sign's been there for quite a while, and it's there because of supply and demand. We need workers. Companies need workers, and here this comes in, brings into another problem too. Is we need workers, but now the government is, promoting and making it too beneficial to stay home and not enter the workforce. They're making it too easy to become reliant on the government, which it can't. So they've taken a simple problem that has such a simple solution, and now they've just escalated that across the state, and the ripple effects are going to be massive from a move like this. And I'm not saying both my sons work, and they're not at $15 an hour right now, but and I would love them to be at $15 an hour. They would love to be at $15 an hour. So this isn't a knock against it, but we have to get the government out of the private sector. We can't manipulate numbers to appease a specific party or a base of a certain party. Yeah, $15 minimum wage sounds fantastic. Shoot, you could tell me that.
Unless you're a small business owner.
Absolutely. So what happens to those small business owners, right? If you were lucky enough to survive this entire pandemic, which so many weren't, those PPP loans, I mean, I won't say very few because I don't know the numbers to these exactly, but so I'd be lying if I told you I did. But I can tell you my wife found a yoga studio that, she absolutely adored. And, that was her outlet from this whole pandemic. That was her time to spend. And that yoga studio shut down very shortly after the pandemic started because these businesses, I mean, minimum wage, that's almost the least of their problems. They can't sustain that, but they can't sustain government coming in and mandating them to close while you look at all these big box stores that are thriving and consolidating and exponentially growing at the same time. So there are multiple prongs to this problem, and one side, it's so simple. So when you focus on a $15 minimum wage, right? It's okay. Now that's the hot topic item. So while everyone fights for that, and we have these big debates back and forth, and one party accuses the other party of being inhumane because we don't want to pay more to this group of workers, what do? They slide one bill after another under the table with no accountability. It's this pandemic. How many? I want to bring this up really quickly because I keep going back to kids on this, but it blows my mind. So this whole time we're under executive orders for these mandates, right? These mandates. So what did our Congress focus on passing? They passed a sex bill for our kids. And again, forgive me because so bring me back, bring me back after this here.
All right, I'll bring you back.
So do you know that sex bill they passed? So again, in what world does any normal adult even think about this? And I'll tell you who thinks about it. Someone trying to normalize pedophilia. It's that simple, right? So if you're in elementary school right now with this new sex bill, SB 818, I believe it is, you have to know and define what hormone blockers are in elementary school. Okay, so obviously, I don't know where to start on that. Then go to, and this, I don't know if this is even appropriate to say, but it's in the bill. You have to, in junior high, define what anal sex is. You're taught what anal sex is in junior high. Again, where is this appropriate? And this is what they passed. Or maybe if your underage daughter gets pregnant, now they pass legislation where you don't have to get your parents' consent or even let your parents
let them know. Right.
Exactly, that you're going to have an abortion. That's a medical procedure. I think a lot of folks say, okay, it's just, they pop a pill. No, you can get an abortion all the way through. That's a medical procedure that their parents, if it happens early on enough, won't even know about. Or let's get rid of the law that says you have to inform of HIV prior to, any type of relation with somebody.
Right.
We got rid of that. Okay, so what are we really focused on here? We have a pandemic going on, yet this is the priority of a certain party,
right?
Which, again, is appalling to me. But I'm sorry, that just kind of
hit
me when you're talking.
It's a radical agenda and it's being played out.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. Across the entire, not even specific to the state, but across the entire country, and it's sad. It's very sad.
Yes. All right, we're going to switch direction a little bit.
Okay.
And I want to go to illegal immigration.
Okay.
Illegal immigration has been an issue within Illinois for some time. They passed a sanctuary bill giving extraordinary rights to illegal aliens, blocking police cooperation with immigration officials, and eliminating detention centers. What should happen legislatively to remedy this massive policy failure?
So again, simple problems, simple solutions. Immigration is not difficult. There's already laws on the book. All they have to do is be enforced. I mean, we don't have to make this big, complicated mess out of it. We don't have to file all this new legislation. All we have to do is follow the law. It's that simple. Illegal immigration is illegal, right? And it should be treated as such. You should not be rewarded for entering a country illegally. A country without borders is not a country. in any sense of the word.
Right.
So first, you have to address the illegal immigration problem. I am completely pro-immigration, but you got to do it the right way, right? I told you earlier, my wife is Hispanic, and her son's grandpa, her dad, they were from Mexico. Her grandpa from Mexico, and they did it the right way. They came here the right way, and it means so much more. And she'll tell you herself, she is 100% anti-illegal immigration. And she is 100% pro-legal immigration because it just means so much more. It meant so much more to her family to do it the legal way than to just cross the border. Cross the border.
It's odd that you mentioned those that have come here legally. Even my wife. I find it. I have never really come across anybody who came here legally in support of someone who had come here illegally.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's hard for, I guess, a constitutionalist or for those that actually believe in the law and order in this country, to really wrap our heads around what's going on right now. I mean, there's a blatant disregard for the law, and like I mentioned, it's sad because it's not a hard problem to fix.
Right.
And it's a simple problem to fix. You don't even have to really create laws to fix it. But I'll tell you, when I am seated in the Senate, I will work with. I'm not going to target I'm not targeting anyone for this illegal immigration, but we need to start this. Start enforcing current laws. We do. It's that simple. What happens when you have an unchecked border? My wife would tell me this too, and because obviously, she has a great deal of experience in this area. A lot in this, so many people don't realize this. So many of the folks that are coming over from the border, they're not from Mexico. They're from anywhere around this world. But I'll tell you, almost any girl that comes across this border is that's trafficked across this border. They take, and I forget it's the morning after pill. I forgot the actual name of the pill.
We'll call it the morning after pill.
The morning after pill. These girls are being forced to take this pill,
right, because
the expectation to come across the border is the sexualization of these children. I mean, why? If we cut the border, if we stop the illegal immigration from the border, we stop that type of sex trafficking down there as well. Again, such simple solutions. The only reason this is even a problem today is because our leaders in Congress, federal and states, choose not to enforce existing law, and beyond choose not to enforce it, are actively working against it. They're promoting it. So it's a simple fix. It really is. But we need good people in Congress and across the state, across the country, to enforce these laws.
Yeah, it's no coincidence that our current administration federally is probably one of the largest human traffickers in America right now, where you have an enormous amount of people coming across the border, and they're literally in the middle of the night, early morning, sending them to places. For what reason?
It's a travesty. It truly is, and that is something that's going to be one of my top focuses, to be honest with you. And child sex trafficking is there's no words to explain it. It's the United States is, I believe, we're number one now in moving for child sex trafficking. The last I saw, and it's, if I'm wrong, please let me know. But I think Washington D.C. on Super Bowl during the Super Bowl is the highest sex trafficked area in the entire nation per year. How sad is that? Washington D.C. I mean, this is where our elected officials are, and this is where the biggest sex trafficking problem resides. So, this one's not such a simple problem with a simple answer to it, like so many of the other ones are. This is a very complex problem. Why? It's because it's deeply embedded into our entire government, into the entire structure of this country.
Right.
And this is going to take a lot of prayer and a lot of good people stepping up to actually combat this. And I will, again, that will be one of my top focuses as well when I am seated in the Senate to address this. And I'll tell you right now, my wife is, one of the biggest advocates for it as well. We have to end the sex trafficking, and obviously, a great deal of it starts on the border.
On the southern border.
A
Yes.
great deal of it does.
Let's move to the election
Okay.
or the electoral process. Do you support term limits and elected officials in all levels of government?
Absolutely. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not, but when you think of Congress, right? I call them the seniors, the senior Congress, right? We have more senators, U.S. senators, U.S. congressmen over 75 years old. So the simple solution message is what does power and time equal, right? Corruption. That's 10 out of 10 times. That's what you're getting when you add power and time. It's just that simple. So I absolutely believe in term limits. And as far as elections are concerned, mail-in voting, right? There's a place for absentee voting. There needs to be one day of voting, and we need to move back to paper ballots. It's a have to. And if this country wants to get any sense of normalcy back to the election process, where the voters actually have faith or a little bit of confidence, need I say, in the process, it has to be paper ballots. It just has to be. There needs to be one day of voting, and there needs to be a mechanism in place, which there already is, for absentee voting. If you're in the military, if you're a senior and you can't make it, or if you're just you're just sick or you have some type of disability, there has to be a mechanism for those folks to vote.
Right.
But ballot harvesting, how does this even make sense? I mean, if you took what we're promoting in this country, we are no better than any type of banana republic out there right now. It's sad, again, but the problem is so simple. It's so simple. But moving back to the term limits, absolutely, term limits are. If we can term limit the president of the United States, the fact that we can't term limit a congressman, a state senator, in my case, and when this country was formed, this wasn't going to Congress wasn't so much of a privilege where you went and got all this power and fame and fortune and turned it into a Hollywood atmosphere. You went there, you did your duty, you did what's right by the people that elected you, and then after your 2-year, 4-year, whatever term, you went home and they brought in someone else. And it's that simple. It's that simple. We don't need. I don't know what that looks like as far as how do you limit that and what type of mechanism you put in place to start, bringing some of the, folks that have been there for 40 years, moving them out.
Right.
But I will tell you right now, there's amazing things happening this time around in this election. There's going to be amazing things. We're going to see a turnout from hardworking Americans, normal Americans like me and you. We're going to see a turnout that just blows every other election away.
Right.
And so my message to your listeners would be, you have to vote enough of us in. You have to vote enough of us in to where I try to word this right, but you got to get enough of us young people in there that have the same at one time that know how horrible term limits are and will act on it immediately, because there's no piecemealing this together. You're either gonna do it like that, you're gonna rip the Band-Aid off, or you're just gonna get kind of tug at it here and there.
Right.
Term limits aren't gonna go away unless it has to be one swift punch.
just get it done.
Just get it done. Stop talking about it. Just get it done. I'm more than happy to term limit myself.
Sure.
I'd be more than happy to. To be honest, I don't plan on being there. I want to be there for a couple terms. I want to see some real change in Illinois. I want to see I want to see kids be protected. I want to see strong legislation that protects our kids. I want to see strong legislation to protect the cops. I want to see cameras in every classroom. How simple is that? Where you put cameras on cops, okay? Why can't we put them in classrooms? Why can't we make it transparent?
Sure.
Right? It's that simple. Let's, get some good legislation out there, and let's protect it and get some good people in there. And you know what? I don't want to be running down to Springfield the rest of my life.
Sure. No, you don't.
I mean, I really don't. And to be honest, Illinois is a great state, but I've been working in the cold now for almost 20 years. Eventually, I want to go down south. I want to be warm, So,
Yeah.
but I can't leave Illinois the way it is right now. And there's so many parents that feel the same way. We gotta stand up. We gotta take the state back, or our kids are going to. They're not. We already don't recognize this country. Imagine what our kids are going to feel like when they look back. They're going to look and say, they're going to grab their phone. They're going to say, I walk into McDonald's. They're going to have to click their little thing like they do for coupons right now and say, here's my papers. I've been vaccinated. I am masked. I only drove 3 miles to get here, so I have 5 more miles left on my card before what's the new environmental legislation, right? So
Yeah.
Oh gosh, there's going to be, this is going to grow. These kids are not going to know, and that, who's to say when they can go to school?
Right.
If we allow these type of compulsory decisions and mandates to stand right where they are right now, I'll tell you right now, no government's ever peacefully given back them types of freedoms to the people after they're taken. And what happens? And I'm sure they expand.
Yes.
They continue to expand until
Worked that way from 1913
absolutely
with the Federal Reserve Act.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very, very good point.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do? We take a stand now, or we give up the country?
Yeah, just sit quietly.
Yes, and we do what we're told, like good little workers.
Yep. Well, the good thing is it doesn't seem like that's the part that's taking place right now.
Oh, yes.
It seems that there is a movement to actually do the opposite. And people are starting to get a strong constitutional education.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, wow. I mean, I've been immersed in this type of, in the Constitution since the last 2 years. I'll say something that, I'm not ashamed of. I was, just like so many middle-class Americans in Illinois, or Illinoisans, right?
Right.
I was born in the middle class, and my wife was born in a very poverty-stricken area.
Mm-hmm.
I was born as a Democrat. I was raised as a Democrat. My wife was too. Why? Her mom told her that you have to vote Democrat because they give you free stuff. I was born Democrat just because my parents weren't very political, but it's just that's what we do, right? We vote for the people that give us free stuff. And for me, it really wasn't until I started questioning what's going on in this country. I'm like, okay, so why are we doing this? And so I started reading legislation that the Democrat Party was putting out, and the more I read, the more I'm like, how am I voting for this? I've been voting for this. I'm like, it just blew my mind. I'm like, I'm actually voting for this policy. I'm like, whoa. And that's when I turned to the Republican Party. And you read the policy, it's night and day. I mean, if you look at, I argue with multiple, state representatives and senators over the Healthcare Right Conscience Act, right? They were doing their caucus, and they added a amendment per se, I don't even want to call it that, to the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act. And it's 2 paragraphs, but the fact that, I mean, if you read them, and I'm sure you have, I mean, they give the private industry, the government, the ability to fire somebody or refuse service to somebody for not choosing to participate in one of their mandates, any of them.
Yep.
So we're going to fire you. Your companies can fire you, or they can refuse service, or so. I guess, I mean, it's not a huge stretch to think about how this isn't an element of a controlled state. We are living in a controlled state, and I know every election is the same, right? Everyone's like, this is our one shot. We have to do it this time, right? This is our one shot. This November is our one shot because everyone's seen what could, how fast this country has declined in literally a year. I mean, we still have to get to November, and then, till we're seated in January. So we're looking at 2 years. We've seen how fast this country deteriorated in 1 year. Imagine this 2 years till we get to election day.
Right.
Well, look past that. Now, if they're reelected, now look at your 4 years past that. There's not going to be a state left.
Right.
We are going to usher in a level of communism. I'm not, I hate to use that word.
Well, you shouldn't, because it's true.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah, we understand that the progressive left has become communist.
They absolutely have, and we're not fighting no more for policy ideas. I think we're far beyond that. I mean, any party that can, push a bill that, pushes the sexualization of our children, we're no longer arguing party lines.
No.
Now we're arguing good versus evil, and it's that simple. It really is. Do you want your kids to be over-sexualized and exploited in schools? Or do you want your freedom as a parent to make those decisions for your children? Do you want crime just expanding like wildfire across this country? Or do you want to hire more police officers and give them the tools they need to rein in this crime? I mean, the policy decisions that need to be made transcend party lines. I hate to even call myself, you're a Democrat or a Republican. No, I'm a concerned parent. It's that simple. And I have a moral conviction that says crime, we have to stop the crime. We have to get criminals off the street, and we have to protect our children at all costs. And in the same sense, we have to expand our business. We have to let our businesses thrive.
Right.
We have to let them work inside this, country of opportunity. So there's so many things that need to be done, but if the Democratic Party is not going to get us there, it's just that plain and simple.
Right.
So we all have a choice come June in the primary, right? June 28th, the primary. And then we all have a choice come November.
Right.
And this is going to be the choice of a lifetime. You're either going to give your kids to the government.
The election of elections.
Absolutely. And this isn't even the presidential election. I mean, there's never been an election with more dire consequences, especially a midterm, than this one coming up.
Right. Right. Phil, thank you for joining us at SAT Media. It was truly a pleasure to sit down and talk with you today.
Thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure, and if you have an opportunity in the future, feel free to. I'd love to come back and talk with you again. And like I said, it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to this coming year and taking back the House and the Senate.
Yep. Good luck with the election, and again, we'll talk before that ever happens again.
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
Thank you.